something shifting here. So there is definitely a divorce narrative between Israel and America. So that either it could go two ways. Israel carries on bombing Lebanon, weakening Hezbollah to try and get negotiation level, or Trump has given the green light for Iran to go and pummel Israel.
You're watching Capital Cosm. My name is Danny. It is June 17th, 2026, and my guest today is Simon Dixon, big fan favorite. Simon, thank you so much for coming on.
Always a pleasure. What are we going to talk about today?
Yeah, well, you know what? Let's just talk about the big story, which is the Trump Iran deal that's to be signed on Friday. Trump made some comments earlier today. He says he will, quote, go right back to dropping bombs if he doesn't like the Iran deal. And I believe he said this in when he was in the company of the Egyptian president, El-Sisi, at the G7. So, yeah, walk us through this deal. Walk us through what you think of Trump's recent comments and anything noteworthy out of the G7.
Yeah, so we currently got the G7 that started on Monday. It's a bit of a packed week this week, actually, really eventful. Yeah. So on Monday, the G7 kicked off. And so we've been dripping out like comments. The whole show's really centered around Trump. Ukraine, Russia, Iran. So just war, NATO, Trump. We can go through some of the things that were said there. Then yesterday we had the hiking of the Bank of Japan rate. So that's decoupling from the Japan carry trade. Very important thing. But that seems to be, a smooth managed transition. Today we've got the first comments from Kevin Warsh at the Federal Reserve. I'm expecting, no changes there, but I mean, the Fed, whether they hike rates or decrease rates, probably at the next meeting, really sets the tone for what's going to happen next. So it's really, really important one. Then tomorrow we got Bank of England. I think whether they're going to, they can't hike rates, they can't reduce rates. They're in stagflation effectively, bad growth, no story of anything that's going to be happening there. They're still recovering from the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Energy prices giving them a bit of a relief, but supply chain issues. And I don't think we'll see much changes there on the Bank of England side. But, we've got in the US, 4.2% inflation, 6% PPI. So at least in the short term, we're definitely moving to an inflation cycle. Then on Friday, we've got the infamous MOU, which we can talk about. So last time we spoke, we were talking about the Xi Jinping meeting where the executives of military, financial and technology, not military, more financial and technology, met with Trump in Beijing. And really my analysis on that is that they're securing their supply chains, their cheap labor, their factories, their rare earths, and making sure that that relationship is okay in exchange for a standoff on Taiwan. And so Xi Jinping announced, don't touch Taiwan. And Trump said, don't touch Taiwan. We had the cancellation of a $13 billion military defense contract in Taiwan. And we led into the AI IPO cycle. After that, the shipment started coming out of the Strait of Hormuz, and we led to the next, second round of aggression. Everyone's thinking this is going to break down again. And then suddenly we get into the MOU, which I think has already been agreed. We're just having the public theatrics of how to present what will be, what will come in the MOU and how to represent that to the three factions of domestic nationalistic power, i.e. Israel, US, and Iran. And I expect it to be signed on Friday, whether we get messing around. There's some holdout clauses with what's Israel going to do with Lebanon, what's Iran going to do in the Strait of Hormuz, that allows it to go back to a negotiation cycle. But in the end, I think the MOU is signed on Friday, and then we enter into a 60-day negotiation period. If you remember, I said that that's got to coincide with the SpaceX IPO.
Right.
And so the SpaceX IPO was on, so after it didn't come during the Xi Jinping meeting, that SpaceX IPO has to go well, and it did go well. So we've now got, the first trillionaire net worth on paper wealth with Elon Musk. We've got a bunch of liquidity from a number of people that had SpaceX shares. We have the lock-in periods for those that invested in the VC private equity rounds. And then we've got the Anthropic and OpenAI IPOs and all the other ancillary activities and the liquidity squeeze that we're seeing out of markets. Now, that IPO did well. So I think it's now, I don't know where we are today. I haven't checked in once after this when the market's open, but I think we're about $2.3 trillion company with a pure narrative story of putting, servers in. But the point is that the liquidity needed to go well. If that led to a dump cycle and it didn't go well, then that's going to set the framework for all the other AI companies. That's going to cause serious issues in stocks. And so it was really an all-in moment. We had a week of heightened bond yields above 5% on the 30-year Treasury yield, and then above 4.5% on the 10-year. Mortgages above 7%. Oil was slowly coming down. It wasn't pricing in disaster. And gold was coming back off. Bitcoin was coming back off. Stocks had a pump and then a little bit of a dump. But now we're back up to, smooth markets, contingent upon, this being an MOU that's signed. Lots of drama probably in the weeks ahead, but I don't think anything stops this. It's all in. And so bond yields have come back off the danger territory of 5%, 4.5%. Mm-hmm. And the MOU looks like we're kind of getting this very strange, what's in it, what's not in it. The most important things we won't see in the MOU. It is that we know the framework. The framework is there's going to be sanction relief and there's going to be tiered. We know that it takes off are they going to launch a nuclear bomb? Are they not? That goes away, which has been a 50-year story, which has justified 50 years of military interventions. It also radically changes the role of Israel, because if Israel doesn't have a boogie monster, then its purpose is reformed. So we started to get at the G7 meeting this narrative, which I was expecting, of Trump exerting influence over Netanyahu to reverse the Netanyahu controls Trump narrative. And I think that's all been negotiated. I think Netanyahu is complying. Trump is complying with real power, military and financial power. And this will lead to the election regime change, and my long-term prediction that we'll end up with a more GCC-aligned Israel, with more and more privatizations and more asset sales within some kind of, whether it's Abraham Accord or an alternative structure based upon BRICS or whatever, more and more acquisitions of Israeli assets that takes away state power over to private power. And when it's private power, you can then regime change and have a Palestinian state, because Saudi's still pushing the holdout clause. And so we started to see much of the things that I thought were happening behind the scenes publicly show. So UAE met with Iran, demonstrating there was $3 billion allegedly that was transferred to Iran, either via Qatar or UAE. We know that Iran and UAE work together very strongly in the sanction circumvention side, while UAE normalizes with Israel and acquires the assets, leaves OPEC, gets the FX swap line to create dollars based upon their currency, and is also managing a central bank digital currency network. So UAE is really selling a lot of its retail assets in institutional assets as a result of the distress, but really being pushed as a financial center. Saudi is doing the holdout clause, did a regional security agreement that consists of Turkey's military, industrial complex, Pakistan's nuclear might, Egypt's military army, and Saudi funding as the head of the GCC. Now, when you combine that with Iran, because of the normalization between Iran and Saudi, the real question is, what happens to Iran if you relieve sanctions? Well, now you've got the second largest LNG reserves in the world on the market. You've got all the rebuild contracts from all the destruction that needs investment, or it needs a mechanism for being rebuilt internally. And you have the Gulf countries that get to renegotiate the rebuild of their bases under regional defense contracts, BRICS and China aligned defense contracts, and some bribe money for Western powers in order to leave them alone. And so if you look at where this is all headed, what are the key terms that are being negotiated in the MOU? Well, you've got the front-facing narrative, which is nukes and defense. Then you've got what really glues everything together. Sanction relief. You've got 2 to 4 million barrels of oil from OPEC member Iran that will come online. Is that going to be priced in dollars, or is that going to be priced in yuan? The toll booth on the Strait of Hormuz, is that going to be priced in Bitcoin? Is there going to be no toll? What happens with the Gulf countries? They need to protect their interest as well. And so you started to notice these narratives slowly moving towards Oman and Iran will control the strait, but there'll be a $300 billion reparations agreement. That $300 billion will be a fund. It won't be reparations. If this is not what, if they're just going to give $300 billion of US taxpayer money, and then that goes to rebuilding contracts with China, then yeah, you could say that there's no integration here.
And supposedly half has already been committed even before the deal is signed. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, well, this is what I think they've really been negotiating, which is who's going to rebuild, what infrastructure is going to be rebuilt, who's going to do it, what is the future funding, financing needs. And this was the destroy and rebuild model. This is like the classic model. And that $300 billion is what everyone needs to watch. It could be covert funding via China, via different structured vehicles. It could be a fund that in the back has some Trump slush money, some Western financial interest. But Iran needs to show strength. And effectively, this opens up Iran to a regional investment order led by China, but needs some bribes for America to stop the military forever war model. And how do you make that transition? Well, you need the IRGC to remain intact. You need those that won't be on board with the plan eliminated. And you need a resistance narrative to show that you fought till the bitter end, and you remained in charge of the Strait of Hormuz. So all of that has been achieved. However, we started to see the first signs of kind of protest around Lebanon, because the reality is that this is a transition from opening up to investment to no longer needing to resist in order to have negotiation leverage to get sanction relief. Because that sanction relief leads to a bunch of money from oil sales, LNG sales, any toll booths, and a new economy. So in exchange for that, there will be backdoor agreements to slowly transition away from resistance, because effectively, as long as you can set a tone where Israel is no longer used to agitate the forever war model, and everyone is plugged together via regional investment contracts, including China, GCC, Iran, defense contracts, and bribes to Western powers, then that 300 billion tells me that it will be all investment contracts. It won't be a reparation fund. And my guess is that the makeup of who invests, the blend between GCC, local, Chinese, and Western financial industrial complex, will really tell you who won this war, and what the outcome and all the levers that were pulled. So I'll be really concentrating on how that is structured. I think, although we're going to see lots of drama, I think this is the worst thing that could ever happen to Israel. And we had a Zionist meltdown, and we still got a Zionist meltdown. But in my understanding of the world, there's a bit of good cop, bad cop being played there. You use Netanyahu in Israel in order to get your bad cop. Trump says, I'm trying to create peace and world peace here. You get your good cop. There's the holdout clauses with Hezbollah in Lebanon and IRGC and Strait of Hormuz that can always tip something if the negotiations aren't going in the right direction. And then you just put ratchet clauses in where if you've achieved this goal, you get this amount of sanction relief, this investment contract, and then you just, it's going to take years. This is going to be a long-term thing. This is no small agreement to put together. But, I've long believed that the war was part of the negotiation. And if you want to be a bit more conspiratorial, everything that was blown up was meant to be blown up, and everything that's about to be rebuilt is about to be rebuilt in line with a new world order. And the closure of the strait created the repricing of everything that created a massive concentration of wealth upwards and put stress on markets. And Trump delivered for the powers that he answers to, and so did Netanyahu. And so to me, it's a signal that we now get this moment where Trump, kind of says, I created the most important peace agreement moving forward. He got the massive pump in the stock market, which is what he needs. Israel gets to say, Israel is the net loser, but they need to hold on to Lebanon and Hezbollah to continue the narrative that we're in charge. And then Iran has just demonstrated real strength, and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz acts like the Suez Canal moment to the British Empire when they couldn't defeat Egypt. So this is a life-changing event. It is a new world order. It has started. We have entered into that world. And this transition now is how we manage that world and split the world into parts.
What are the chances that we do see another round of strikes between Iran and America and Israel, or some combination of the two? Because you look at the history, Israel has broken its ceasefire agreements with Lebanon 80 plus times. The U.S. has been the last two times, or more than that actually, since the 12-day war, and the most recent round of fighting back in late February. Those were all facilitated initially by the U.S. So how much credence can we give the enforcement capacity of this deal that's been signed? It is an MOU at the end of the day. It's not a treaty or anything. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I know most people, based upon historical, if I were judging this as we're not in a new world order, there is no China, and America's a global hegemon, then I'd be as skeptical as everyone else is. Because I believe that we're entering into a new world order and China has significant leverage over American private interest, I believe that China's playing the 5D chess. And I believe it's got serious cards. But you don't get press releases for that. You just get press releases for the other side. The Iran side, the Israel side, the American side. And so half of what's happening here is that America doesn't have the ability, or Israel, to be fully autonomous like they would have in the past, because Israel power is based upon American power. So if American power is going, then Israeli power is going. And there is, there's no set of circumstances where America falls and Israel survives. So, I believe I'm split between two possibilities here. I think US, I'm pretty sure US is out. So you won't see much from US, is my belief here. But it could go two ways. It could go that Israel does what Israel always does, which is it kills civilians in Lebanon in order to inspire retaliation from Hezbollah. Hezbollah retaliates, and we end up with the continuation of IDF gets weaker when they do ground invasions and Hezbollah kicks their ass. And Israel retaliates by bombing civilians and what Trump actually for the first time admitted in the G7 meeting, which is remarkable. That means that there's a change of, we're ready for the next phase here. The fact
what did Trump admit?
Trump in a G7 meeting was basically laying into Netanyahu and Israel, saying you don't need to kill civilians and blow up buildings to get Hezbollah. And really started admitting for the first time that this is kind of a soft way of saying the reality. And we got real, with, he sat there with UAE, sat there with Egypt, but with Sisi and MBZ. And he's really pushing on Netanyahu. He's really pushing on admitting that Israel just kills civilian targets, kills civilians, and they don't need to be that ruthless. I mean, that's American foreign policy, but, whatever. That means that something's shifting here. So there is definitely a divorce narrative between Israel and America, so that either it could go two ways. Israel carries on bombing Lebanon, weakening Hezbollah to try and get negotiation leverage, which is what Israel has always done. They acquire land and then they try and do a deal. And then they start again. Or Trump has given the green light for Iran to go and pummel Israel. But I also think that there's an element of analysis that makes sense here. And depending on which one, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch. Neither of them, I don't believe, will derail the eventual deal. I think this deal is a done deal. But is there, if we're allowed to see that Trump has given the green light for Iran to go and annihilate and destroy more strategic targets in Israel, then that weakens Israel for distressed acquisition by the Gulf countries more and more and more. And we started to see more and more meetings between Iran and Saudi Arabia, Iran and UAE. We started to see that I personally believe that they played good cop, bad cop as well, which is what I've always believed throughout this whole process. And that much of the theatrical fights that they were having was actually part of a more coordinated plan between factions of power. And they had a plan backed by China and Russian intelligence that was helping Iran throughout this whole thing. And we saw that because, we got this, every time we get a tit for tat, we just get more US-based destruction in Jordan, in Bahrain. Last time UAE was kept out of the mix.
What percentage of US bases have been wiped out since the war started? Do you know?
I don't think anyone knows. We've just got what information we're being fed. But certainly it was evacuated by US interests. Certainly, to me, there was no mass casualties of US troops, because just like in the 12-day war, I think there was an element of communication here. And to me, I think every target that's going to be rebuilt is very strategic, both in Iran, both in the Gulf countries, and both all around the region, particularly in Lebanon. And obviously, we've got Gaza as well. But I think you could say that what gives Israel its power and America its power in the region has been destroyed. Whether that be what props up the Iron Dome. I'm not a military guy, but I do frequently listen to people that understand this a bit more than I do. But the equipment, like the radars and the stuff that props up the Iron Dome, that's all been destroyed, and it was dependent upon some of those American Gulf bases. And so everything that made Israel powerful, I think, has been destroyed. And now the relationship between America, Netanyahu, and Trump is being theatrically divorced.
Doesn't it seem a little too on the nose, though? Like they want us to believe that the relationship has been destroyed. It's like they're going out of their way to make it known that America and Israel are drifting apart. One of the key things I noticed was that there was an Axios report, and Axios is essentially a mouthpiece for Israel and that relationship. And they were pushing the idea that Radcliffe and Hegseth were against the deal, but Kushner and Witkoff were for the deal. That just seemed a little off to me, considering Kushner's relationship to Netanyahu. So it seems like they're trying to kind of muddy the waters, at least in my view,
I think so.
Like who of this relationship breaking apart. But is it really? Like, is there a possibility that this could just all be one psyop to get to? Because you do have the midterm elections coming up, and they do want, Trump does want to appear to be purely America first, without any entanglements elsewhere. Could that also not be the case?
I think those clued up are meant to believe that. So there's an element of psy-ops here, right? So there's multiple layers. There's like the dumbest MAGA, who's always meant to believe that, Trump has 5D chess. Then there's the ones like the youth that have figured out what Israel is, and they're meant to believe, okay, it's only because of blackmail and Epstein that we're doing this. And if we could just divorce from Israel and Zionism, then America is an ethical country and there's no empire and it had nothing to do with it. Then there's a layer above, which is, I think, transnational capital, resetting the world into multipolarity, and Trump playing his role for financial players and Netanyahu playing his role for military players. Each person stops at a certain layer. You either, in my perspective, and this is just how I analyze, you either stop at like the boomer, Fox News, CNN, MAGA narrative, or you go to the layer of Israel's in charge, Israel controls everything, and there's no empire agenda here, and if we can divorce from Zionism, everything will be fine. Then there's the reality as I see it, which is this is a coordinated asset stripping transnational capital exercise, and both US and Israel are assets to greater power. And Israel is more aligned with military power in the Middle East, and America is more aligned with financial power, and financial power is aligned with Gulf countries and China. And that's the layer that I kind of analyze at. And if I didn't have that analytical layer above, then I'd stop here. And I just believe, this is theatrics because Israel controls the show. But I don't believe that to be true. I think Israel has its own pressures, and Israel will be regime changed, and Israel will be acquired and integrated into the GCC, and Palestine will have a state. And there was a coordinated attempt from factions of power to make empire crimes by transnational capital and military companies look like they had nothing to do with it, and it was just all because of Zionism. And again, I hate saying that, because then people say, oh, you're making excuses for Israel. No, Israel benefits from this. Israel commits crimes against humanity. And if I was taking off my analytical hat, I'd be speaking very differently, more emotionally. But I personally believe that Israel doesn't rule the world, and Israel is subordinate to greater powers. And I think people give too much credit to Israel, which is they play upon, because although they'll pretend that they think is anti-Semitic, you saying that they rule the world, it projects the power that they have. Because you become a free PR agent for Israeli power by believing that ultimately they always win and they are the almighty and all-powerful and all-controlling. And they play that, just like they play anti-Semitism, where, you know, they pretend that they don't want the world anti-Semitic, but anti-Semitism plays into the Israeli business model. And so they want as much anti-Semitism, and they want people to project as much Israel rules the world PR, because it's free PR, which then becomes a kind of projected self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a very clever PR strategy from my side. So when people realize that actually Netanyahu is lobbied and assassinations happen within Israel and they can be regime changed, and actually they're subjected to fake democracy, which means that lobby rules and private corporate interest rules. You can see how they just use Israel as a money laundering organization to funnel money back to the US stock market, and actually as transnational capital and military power and some of the deep state factions of intelligence agencies, which are coordinated across Mossad, CIA, MI5, MI6, you know, Five Eyes as well. So I think it's a psychological operation, and everyone picks their favorite narrative based upon their understanding. But when I follow the monetary flows, I think this is the worst thing that could ever happen to Israel. And the worst thing is if Iran and America sign a deal, the purpose of the budget being funneled into Israel disappears. And so they would want resistance to continue. And so that gives them the military profits, and regional stability is that $300 billion fund, which is where actually we don't need war. Instead, we actually invest. That is the worst news, because Israel is there to provide war for military profiteers.
Did you hear Trump's comments yesterday about how, you know, yes, he did criticize Israel's take, but then he later said that maybe we should get Israel out of bombing southern Lebanon and get Golani Syria in to do the dirty work. Is that the next step, do you think, or is that too much logistical headache to, you know, get the Syrians involved in southern Lebanon?
I did hear that. It's a very, very interesting comment. So, like, you know, we know that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are assets of intelligence agencies that are often open to the highest bidder. We know that they were manufactured via Saudi intelligence, Mossad, and CIA and MI6 intelligence, and other Five Eye members. We know that most people don't know who they work for, and so the infiltration happens at the highest level. We know that there is genuine resistance, you know, genuine trauma from all the wars and the tortures and the manufacturing of these quote unquote terrorists as assets for intelligence. And we know that we had a regime change of the ex-head of ISIS into the president or prime minister, I get confused sometimes, president of Syria. Mm-hmm. And he shaved his beard, and he then goes to the White House and he's got perfume. But who was he funded by? He was funded by Turkey and the Gulf countries. So yes, he used to be aligned with Western intelligence assets. So most people think he works for Israel. I think he works for Turkey and Gulf countries. And so his job is to not go into war. He needs to stabilize Syria as a placeholder while we transition to this GCC Iran integrated BRICS corridor that this war set up. So Trump coming out and saying Israel isn't doing a good job, maybe I'll get Syria to do it. It plays into that whole narrative of the divorce between Israel and America. It also might be, if I'm reading into this, a green light for what I think maybe it's a little bit of hopium, but actually I think makes sense. It may have been a green light for Iran and Israel to go at it. Because if US stands aside and Israel continues targeting civilian targets once an MOU is done, and Hezbollah retaliates, I don't think it was saying Syria, you go at it with Hezbollah. I think it might have been saying Iran, you go at it with Israel, and they won't intervene. We shall see. I'm a little bit, I'm not 100% on this one. But if we do get an altercation between Iran and Israel without America, I mean, Iran will pummel much of the infrastructure in Israel that will be acquired in distress by the Gulf countries, and that will reset the order and the power dynamics. And that plays into the US exit of the region. If now Israel becomes an asset of GCC and American bases are rebuilt with China Gulf capital, and then Iran is rebuilt with China and Gulf capital and personal funds from whatever we find out happens, and they get sanction relief. I mean, this is the reason for the war in the first place, because the American and British Empire could never allow that to happen. You've got...
What about this new NDAA that was pushed through Congress recently that effectively merges the technology capacity of both the U.S. military and the Israeli military? Isn't Israel about to get a massive upgrade to its military arsenal?
Yeah, so that one's a bit confusing. It plays into both narratives depending on what happens. I think, firstly, what is it? It's actually a reflection of reality. So firstly, Israel and American intelligence have always worked together, and the armies have always been one. It's just good cop, bad cop. Whenever America wants to do crimes against humanity, they do it via Israel. Israel benefits from that. And you get a laboratory in Palestine and North Africa where you can test all your surveillance technology and bioweapons or whatever and all the latest weapons that you're testing and surveillance and technology. And then American companies end up acquiring those as they go private or as they go public. And so firstly, I think it's actually a reflection of how it is. It's also a bit like one way of reading this, again, a bit speculative. If you think about the relationship between, we talked about this before, and then I'll relate it back to this. Taiwan has that silicon shield where both China and American technological industrial complex are dependent upon Taiwan for their semiconductor chips. But if you know that China's going chip independent through Huawei, through their own independent structures, and TSMC is now building in America, which will make them chip independent, and you've got Intel and everything there, then that transition kind of drives everyone into their respective allegiance. So you know that Taiwan's not going to be relevant in the future. It's not going to be defended by America. You know it's going to be integrated with China, and there'll be a political process like Hong Kong. You know that the silicon shield, where everyone needs the chips and only Taiwan can do it, and TSMC can do it, is going to go away. And so those within TSMC that were more aligned with an American ideology, they end up rebuilding the factories in America, and they end up the brain drain over to America. Those that believe the future of the world is China and our partnership as neighbors with China is China, they end up going in that direction. And then eventually the asset is, depleted, and it's no longer needed to be geopolitically defended. Kind of the same with what you could say about this type of integration. You can draw people over to Israel that will need to be aligned via UAE into GCC and India into BRICS. And then those that were kind of Western thinking, all of the brain drain, they all go to Cyprus, they go to Thailand, they go to America, they go to Ukraine, Argentina, wherever they're going. You kind of take the brain drain of all that cybersecurity, Mossad intelligence, and you kind of draw them into an eastward-facing, reformed, newly aligned version of Israel, or they end up just going away and aligning with the regional West. So it's very interesting to watch and observe how this plays out over the next few years and 5 years. Or it could just be, factions of leftover power trying to make something happen that's never going to happen anyway, because it won't get past Congress or Senate or whatever. I'm very conflicted with how to read exactly into that one, but I think it will become clear over time as we learn more and what happens there.
Well, I think that covers pretty much everything on the Middle Eastern front. Anything else you want to touch on before we, kind of wrap things up here?
Yeah, I think next we need to watch. Okay, Japan's going independent, so they're putting rates up to 1%. The Japan carry trade's being killed. We need to watch Kevin Walsh today and the regime change Federal Reserve. And then we need to watch what gets signed and buckle up to the drama. I think we're going to see lots of drama between Iran, Israel, US, Lebanon. I don't think it's by any stretch of the imagination over, but directionally, I think nothing stops this train. I think the financial industrial complex has got their new vision with China. So we'll come back and analyze and see what bits were wrong, what bits were right. But it's a massive week.
And how much of a role do you anticipate China had in getting Iran to sign a deal with the United States? Do you think that it was in Iran's own volition to sign a deal, or was there perhaps a good chunk of influence coming from China and maybe Russia as well?
I think that China and the Iran reformist governments and factions of the IRGC were working on this plan way back from Trump administration 1. And this was just a continuation of what they planned. And the war was part of the negotiations. Because if you remember what I said, the team that were negotiating before the war, during the war, and after the war are all still alive today. They didn't get assassinated. There was no decapitation campaigns on them. And we're starting to see a bit of concern around Iran protests, calling people traitors and that type of stuff. I don't expect that to turn anything nasty, because I don't think the future of Iran is a destabilization regime change campaign. I think it's going to move into regional stability here and a soft landing, a safe landing. And I think it's going to be great for Iran. I think it's going to be great for the region. But I believe that China and the Gulf countries and Iran factions of power planned this whole thing. And it was way before the war. So I don't think they needed to be pushed into it. The meetings and the negotiations and the Islamabad Accords, I think, were more like check-in reports on who's not on board the plan and who is on board the plan. And I think China was always playing the 5T chess. And I think that's happened all along.
Will there be a single hegemon? Do you anticipate in the Middle East? Will it be Iran? You've got some heavy hitters. You've got Iran, Turkey, Pakistan, Saudi, Israel right now is at the present time. But, based off your projections, you think that'll kind of be integrated into a larger system? But go ahead.
Yeah, I think there'll be more integrated regional blocks. I don't think anyone's got the whole equation. And I think that's the purpose of the $300 billion rebuild contract, is to plug everyone together that needs to be plugged together. And so I think that the Middle East, the Sykes-Picot Act that created this mess in the first place by the British Empire and the French Empire, has been unwound, and everyone's putting together into a version of regional stability backed by SEO and China strength. So I don't think there'll be a regional hegemon. I think there'll be new contracts. There'll be pipelines between the Gulf countries and Iran. There'll be new trade routes. There'll be rebuild contracts. There'll be regional defense pacts. And I think Iran has a lot to offer, as well as does Turkey, as does Egypt, as does Pakistan, as does the financial powers of Saudi and UAE and Qatar. This is the West's worst nightmare. This is what we tried to prevent in the first place. And I think they'll be at the center of the world in a tax-neutral jurisdiction between the petro-yuan or LNG yuan and the petrodollar and the LNG dollar in the East and West. And I think they can, to a certain degree, determine the balance of that. And I think, the balance of that in this world where everything becomes about electricity, LNG, power, AI, and robotics.
Would you be shocked or surprised if strikes resumed, if war resumed at some point in the next 60 days or maybe even beyond that?
No, I think if it continues in Lebanon, if Israel and Iran hit each other, if US comes back in, then it would kind of falsify a bit of my theory here, unless it's some kind of quick theatrics, blow up some stuff. So I personally believe US is done, but I think we could see definitely some more back and forth in the Lebanon, Iran, Israel side. But if the US stays out of that and leaves them at it, then I think that's a very positive sign.
Interesting. Well, I think we covered pretty much everything on that front. I'm running a little short on time here, Simon. Thank you so much for your time as always. Where can people find you if they want to see more of your work?
I'm on X at Simon Dixon Twit, where I give real-time analysis as it comes out. On YouTube, I go live every Friday and follow the money, and kind of falsify things I got wrong or say things I got right. But just look at financial transactions, macro geopolitics on YouTube, which is Dixon 21, I think, where you can look it up. And then I got a blog, simondixon.com, where I kind of take all of that, put it into AI, and create 5-minute videos for the people that don't have the time to listen to the long form content.
Yeah, and we'll have all your links, Simon, in the description box down below. So just click the description box, and you can check out all of Simon's links there. Also, hit the like button too while you're at it, if you don't mind. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Type "Go Simon Go" in the comments section. I do in fact read the comments, so let me know what your thoughts are. Did you agree? Did you disagree? Is this a psyop? Is America really disconnected from Israel, or is that what they want us to believe? Let me know your thoughts. I do in fact read the comments, and check out our whole host of affiliate links in the description box and pinned comments as well. If you'd like to support the channel that way, you get a cool product. We got a litany of different great products you guys could use, and I do get a commission out of those links as well, so you can support the channel there too. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. Thank you, Simon, for your time, and I will catch you all next time.
Thank you. Hopefully I managed to offend everyone. I normally do.
Almost. I think you did, yeah.